Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon and our 12 Days of Christmas. Today's category is Dungeon Crawlers. So Dungeon Crawlers is right up there with Deck Builders as far as my favorite category or game mechanic. I find them so thematic, at least the ones that I appreciate are generally very thematic. And are usually just fun. You don't have to think too hard about them. There may or may not be some dice rolling, but for those of you who may not know, a dungeon crawler is usually defined as something with generally a story or an objective as you are trying to make your way across some sort of map or terrain. There's usually exploration involved, some character progression or development, usually some tactical combat. Really, it's kind of like they took the kind of scenarios from when people would play D&D and actually just truly, you know, put it all into a box, essentially. And a lot of days now, recently, you can play those without an overlord or a boss, whoever you want to call them. So let's go ahead here and get started. Coming in at number 12, I have Ultra Quest. So Ultra Quest is very much an ode to Hero Quest, which was a classic game from the late 80s, early 90s. And what Hero Quest did was essentially just put you opened up this board and you always started, you would just start in a particular room. And every time you opened a room, you would just, flip over a card and it would tell you what was in this room. And there's some really fun like cardboard furniture you could put in the room and a bunch of miniatures, and it really was kind of ahead of its time. So this was really a love letter to Hero Quest, and it's called Ultra Quest. And so there is a way to play this game via campaign, but it's really meant to be these one-off scenarios where it wasn't even like a preset map, where you would lay out this map in front of you with all these various rooms. You would pick a room to begin in, and then you would just go from there. And every time you opened up a room, you would, spawn some sort of furniture. You would generally spawn some monsters, events would happen, things like that. And all of this utilized the Sadler Brothers modular deck system, which I think is a really great system. This whole plug and play, I want to be Rowan and, this hero, Quella, and I want to play against the pig people, and this is going to be the scenario. So you just pull out those decks, you give them all a shuffle, and then you just play. So it's very deck-based, but there is a lot of dice rolling. They use the whole exploding dice mechanic from like Arcadia Quest, where you could keep rolling successes, which is always fun. And I thought that the card play was really smart. This one really has unfortunately fallen down on my list because of the company. I'm not going to get up on my soapbox, but Blacklist Miniatures I don't think is long for this world, which is unfortunate, because I doubt we will see any attention paid to this. Maybe some other company will pick it up. The Sadler Brothers don't even work for Blacklist Miniatures anymore, which is really kind of sad, because this, I think, was really it was a good start and was headed in the right direction. Definitely could use more content. There's already a decent amount of content that came out from a very successful Kickstarter, but after the success of this, things just really kind of went downhill. They mismanaged their money, and I'm still waiting for products from them years and years and years later. So, but anyways, if you can find one of these out in the wild, and it's a decent price, pick your hands up on it, because it's a decent little game. It's not little. Number 11 is Mice and Mystics. So this is by Jerry Hawthorne, who is kind of known as the mice guy. A lot of his games involve either small critters or mice specifically, but he's an amazing storyteller, and works a lot with Plaid Hat games. And this one is just very whimsical. That's honestly the best word I can think of to come up with it. It is kind of brought down the complexity is brought down a little, but it is not a pushover game. This is not necessarily a game even for kids, but one that you could bring your kids to the table, certainly, and have them be involved. All of the characters are either mice and rats, or other creatures that might be like cockroaches and things like that. There's nothing bloody or gory about this game, or scary or anything like that. And it's very simple and straightforward, but the story is just very whimsical. And for me personally, it makes me feel like I am playing Redwall, the board game. So by Brian Jacques. If any of you have read his Redwall series books, you know what I'm talking about. If you are a fan of those books, go pick up this game. This game is still in print, and you will not regret it, because you literally feel like you are playing from one of those books from that series. That's what this game feels like. At number 10, we have Tiny Epic Dungeons. So this is from Gamelin Games and is in their Tiny Epic line, but let me tell you, other than just the box and how they actually fit everything into the box, there's nothing tiny about this game. So Tiny Epic Dungeons is meant to play in this kind of grid where you're just flipping over tiles, or not tiles, cards, square cards, as you kind of procedurally create your dungeon in whatever direction you decide to go in. Eventually you are tasked with finding the entrance to the dragon or the whatever boss you're playing against, their lair, and then defeating the boss. And you're going to come across some rooms with some traps in it, some rooms with some baddies in it. This game also was the first and thus far really the only Tiny Epic game that had actual miniatures. Now they are small, but they still function well. They work well. The bad guys are all represented by wooden meeples, which I think would have been perfectly fine for this game. It still would have played very well. But there's a really great mixture of there's dice rolling, but there is also mitigating your resources, which is really just kind of health and energy, and you can get all these cards, items and things, attachments and weapons, and it just kind of works well for kind of one-off setups. It is not meant to be a campaign, even though if you pick up the little expansion, it does play somewhat like a campaign, but it's really just kind of 3 games stacked together. There's a decent amount of variety with the characters, who all play somewhat asymmetrically. Like I said, there is dice rolling in the game, and there can be just sometimes where you completely get screwed over because you flip over a tile and you just weren't prepared for what was there, and you're toast. But also, for a Tiny Epic game, it takes up a lot of table space. But other than that, it comes in a small box, so if you don't get like the play mats or anything like that, and you can just build the dungeon out on a table, then it actually travels really well. And for the size of it, there is a lot in this box. Number 9 is Batman Gotham City Chronicles. So this one's definitely much more on the... I waffled on whether I should even include this in the list, because it's much more of a tactical skirmish game, in my opinion, but has that dungeon crawler feel with the big sprawling maps, the kind of overlord boss role, the miniatures, certainly. So I'm going to include it because I am quite excited for what's coming with this game, and that is a pure solo mode. So I actually found the solo mode on BGG and played through it, and then had some suggestions and had a lot of nice back and forths with the gentleman who ended up, the Monolith reached out to him and said, hey, will you help us create a solo mode based on what you've already got out there? So I really appreciate that he put himself out there and was just doing this as a fan favorite thing, and that they took it and went with it. So from what I've played with it, it should work. And I think also the reworking of the rule book hopefully will skyrocket this game up various lists of mine. I'm very looking forward to, I guess this is season 3 now of their content, season 1 being the base game. But anyways, these are some of the best Batman miniatures. They cover so many of the characters between all of them. So if you are a fan of Batman, go get this game. If you know, it's not cheap, but it's well worth it. If you also have a gaming group that is willing to, this is a heavy game. There's a lot of rules, but the rules make it feel very realistic. The rules are there for a reason. So it is a tactical skirmisher with a lot of rules. Hopefully the improved rulebook will help you get through it. You can see this purple board that somebody like decorated up on Etsy or something like that is technically you're like, if you are playing the villains, you play much differently than if you're playing just as a single hero. You have this like river of cards and a certain amount of activation points each round. And so the further things are to the left, the cheaper they are to activate. So you may activate something on the left, well then you have to move it to the end of the river, making it more expensive but also pushing everything down. You also then have to decide whether you want to spend those points on like defense when it's not your turn, things like that. And in a very similar way, the heroes have this, just pool of resource cubes that you spend on actions, but then you only are going to recover a certain number of those at the beginning of your turn. So whatever you use for actions and then whatever you may use for defense, you don't want to overspend yourself because you may get overly fatigued. And it's a very smart system. It just is very complicated, but when it does click, when you do finally get through the rule book, it is a beautiful game, and especially if you're a fan of the Batman or the content. Number 8 is Madara. I know plenty of people who this is their top choice, or easily one of their top 3. So I may get a lot of gruff for this being my number 8. It is a great game. There's a lot there. It also is not a light game. It's very complicated. There is a lot of, checks and additions and, buffs and things like that. It also is one that once you get through the rule book is a beautiful game. And this one, literally, no joke, is gorgeous. The miniatures are incredible, especially if you can get them painted up like this guy here did. The artwork is very anime style, and so that may not be for everybody, but the artwork that's throughout the storybook and the boards and everything is spectacular. The story, I will say, that comes along with it is one of the best and most immersive. There is a lot of flavor text in between scenarios. This is a true campaign game. You're not going to play any of these one-off. You can, but I don't know many people who enjoy that being the most way. But there's like complicated dice. You can see here this one with the 7, and there's some shields and a book and a star, and there's so many various different dice. But the story that's in between is excellent. It is very much a like teenage angst story. Like, it feels like something that would be on, Nick Teens or something like that. Like, for the 90210 of our age, maybe even. Anyways, so if you can kind of get past the fact that the story's a little cheesy when you think about what they're dealing with, it is actually a really well written story, and there is a lot of story to keep you immersed in between. But again, this one is very big box. There's a ton of content. It's expensive, but it is worth it. It is complicated, but it is worth it. But again, you have to have that commitment to be ready for everything that's there. Coming in at number 7 is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. So Mansions of Madness certainly fits this criteria of dungeon crawler, but it is much, much more of a mystery. You're technically trying to solve a mystery. There is not necessarily going to be a ton of combat in every single scenario. But Mansions of Madness was the first game by Fantasy Flight in the dungeon crawler line to utilize the app to control the villains and the boss and the antagonists and make it completely cooperative. And that was such a breakthrough. And it is still going strong. Now, there are a lot of reasons why, in my opinion, they should come out with a Mansions of Madness 3rd edition or a collector's edition where they've kind of reworked. First of all, the miniatures in this game are subpar compared to what Fantasy Flight is doing now, especially with what they put out with Descent Legends of the Dark. The miniatures are definitely less quality. They've definitely upped their game since coming out with Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. Plus, those black bases are just awful. I mean, I understand that your whole point was to be able to give you something to stick a little token in so you could keep up with you know, the few stats for the monster, but I mean, that whole setup was just a poor decision. And everybody I know who is serious about the game, including myself, has done what you can see here in this picture of this angry mob, is taken them, painted them up, and then placed them on clear lit go bases. Some people put them on black lit go bases, and that's fine, but the clear really works really well because it lets that artwork from down below shine through. So this game really kind of reminds me, when you look at it, set up of Clue, you know, the game of Clue by Milton Bradley or whatever. And that's very much what it feels like. A lot of times you will just be walking around a house without anything popping out at you until you've like found the right clue, you know, and then find that secret door, which then all the baddies are on the other side of the secret door. But the app puts pressure on you to not just wander around at your leisure doing whatever you feel like. You know, if you take too long, the app's going to continue to pressure you. So there is a lot of content for Mansions of Madness, both in the physical form and in like DLC content of purely just the scenarios that you can get online. There's some really difficult ones, there's some really long ones, there's some really easy ones. There's some really fun mechanics in the expansions, things like that. So if you're looking for something that's less like fantasy or sci-fi and want something a little more realistic and on that Cthulhu side of things, this is a great choice. The reason it's here is because there's just that many good dungeon crawlers ahead of it. Coming in at number 6 is another one by Fantasy Flight, and that's Journeys in Middle-earth. So this is Lord of the Rings. This is their dungeon crawler. And what they did with Lord of the Rings is not only did they hit on a very popular IP, but they did two things with this one. They kind of split the mini scenarios within the campaign into two different types. There's the overworld style where you're traveling across this map and you really are, you know, traveling great distances. Think of the second movie, Two Towers, where Gimli and Legolas and whatever his name is, the guy here in the picture wielding sword, are running across the countryside and just covering massive amounts of distance. That's what that scenario feels like. And then they have much tighter tactical skirmish scenarios, which are on a much more smaller, more zoomed in board, where there's a lot more action happening right there. What they also did was take everything and removed the dice and put everything into a card-based system, where you have this deck of cards which you can add to or subtract to as you improve, put better cards in, but you're going to draw cards and you're able to like manipulate your deck a lot of times between turns. And so you can like peek at the top card. Do you want to keep it there? Do you want to put it at the bottom? Do you want to draw that card and put it into play? Which means you have it for its effect, but you've also then lost it for its successes on the card. And so every time you have to take a test, instead of rolling dice, you're drawing cards, a certain number of cards, and seeing how many successes there are. Well, the best cards with the best abilities on them to put in front of you are also the ones with the most successes on them. So you're making that conscious choice of removing those from your deck. Anyways, once you get your deck built up, and you've like leveled up in a way and gotten better cards in your deck, it's quite easy for you to almost manipulate your deck and always know what's there sitting on top, things like that. So it's a great theme. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, this is a no-brainer. The miniatures are great, much higher quality than Mansions of Madness. This card system is really nice, and some people may appreciate it who are not fans of dice rollers if they're more Euro-based fans, because there is no dice in this. There's no randomness of the dice. There is somewhat randomness of drawing a card, but again, you can manipulate a lot of times what those top few cards are. So there's that. And I literally just realized I spent the entire time talking about this game and we were just stuck on the cover page. But here you can see some amazingly painted miniatures. You can see the basically kind of two looks at the overworld map. That's what they look like. And you can see here just picture one of the characters with their stats. Also some of the cards laid out in front of them, their resources, things like that. So, but I think I've spoken enough about this game. Number 5 is Nemesis. I'm going to make sure I jump to the pictures this time. So Nemesis, again, is certainly a dungeon crawler. There is exploration. There is very tactical combat, as in, like, you better be sure you want to get into this combat and not run. There's not so much character progression or leveling up or anything like that, but there's definitely a story. And this one definitely is dripping with theme. So this is essentially Alien, the board game. It is so tense, especially when I play solo and I'm sitting by myself in the basement and I'm just like creeping from room to room, trying not to make noise, and then you make noise in the wrong room, you get a bad die roll, and then boom, this alien comes out, and all you can think of is just run. How do I get out of here? Run away, run away, run away. So again, there's a lot of exploration because for the most part, all of the tiles are flipped over. Even though it's a ship that you've been traveling on for a while, you're still lost in it, I guess. But you're going from room to room, but there's so many fun little ways to win or die. Do you fix the engines? Do you even care about where you're going? Do you fix the navigation? Do you just go in for escape pods? Are you trying to kill the queen so you can just fly this thing safely home? Are you trying to just put yourself in cryogenesis freeze? There's various missions. You can play this cooperatively or semi-cooperatively or solo. Semi-cooperatively means that everybody's trying to kill off the aliens, but everybody has this like secret objective, some of which may be you should be the only last man standing, leave everybody else and blow up the ship type of stuff. So that it's almost like a traitor mechanic. But it's very well done, very thematic, space horror. If that's what you're into, this is a no-brainer. If you love that series of movies, Aliens and the Nostromo and everything else, Ridley, this is a no-brainer. This is one of Awakened Realms' best, in my opinion, and definitely, fits the genre of dungeon crawler, in my opinion. So, there you have it. Number 4 is Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape. I honestly thought this one, especially when it came in, was going to be much higher on my list. But this is definitely one of my favorites from 2022, once it finally came out. And it is, by and far, strides ahead of the original Massive Darkness. There is these unique character classes which all play significantly different, and what Massive Darkness 2 delivered on is what I was hoping for Merchant's Cove to be. But Merchant's Cove felt like I was just playing a separate game from everybody else, and almost felt like a chore of having to relearn everybody when I would switch from one whatever person to the next. This one, the core rules are all the same, but you know, how do you go about making your person the best is different. So your mechanics, one might be like a little rondelle for the magician, or one is a bag builder, or one's a little deck builder. One's a push your luck element. You know, there's some very simple ones and then some very complicated ones. I honestly think that the reason this one is not higher on my list is I almost have component fatigue from Massive Darkness because of, you know, having gone all in on the content and having all the content. I wanted to just go ahead and mix everything in together. And the fact that any mob, which is, you know, 3 to 4 monsters usually, could come out at any given time, you kind of have to have all of them accessible when you're playing. And so it's like, where do I set all this stuff up? So anyways, the game is a lot of fun. It's meant to be played as one-off scenarios, but there are campaign expansions for the game. I finally did wise up to the fact that, wait a minute, I'm only playing solo, so I'm really only ever going to see 3 or 4 of these miniatures when I have 8 of every miniature, because you could play up to 6 players. So I finally stored away half of every miniature in a box and, you know, just put it in the closet where I don't plan on getting it out anytime soon. That's less I have to paint, less I have to get to the table. And so yeah, hopefully that'll help. I've had a lot of other stuff coming on with COVID, everything getting slowed down. There was a backlog, and now it seems like everything is being delivered these days, or soon to be delivered. But anyways, I super appreciated and think they did an amazing job with the kind of asymmetrical factions, or, you know, classes, and how they work, and each little mechanic being so uniquely different, but really fun to play through. And you can certainly pick your favorite and stick with it, or you can just dabble in everything, which is what I like to do. Number 3 is Star Wars Imperial Assault. This is easily one of my forever games, a lot of which being because of the theme. I love Star Wars. But this and Descent were some of the first games I began to solo. When Fantasy Flight came out with the ability to run through the AI on their app, and came out with an app for Descent, and then fashioned one just the same for Imperial Assault. They're essentially the same game. It's just Descent has a very, you know, very much generic D&D fantasy theme on it, and this is Star Wars. This is space and Star Wars. So I was always drawn to this one slightly more than Descent, and loved my Descent 2nd edition collection. Unfortunately got rid of it in anticipation for Descent Journeys in the Dark, and Journeys in the Dark really just didn't hit for me. This one I'm not letting go of for any particular reason. The first miniatures I started painting on were Stormtroopers. Like I said, the first like cooperative game I sat down and played solo was Imperial Assault. It is your classic dungeon crawler. It is, you know, move X number of spaces and do an attack or open a door or something like that. There is a lot of dice rolling. There's like checking range and line of sight and things like that. It is not a perfect game. Some parts of it are very outdated to this day, but it's just such a classic in my opinion. It is hard not to just keep coming back to this game, especially because of the theme. So if you are a Star Wars fan, which I'm sure there are a lot of you who watch this channel, go out and get you Star Wars Imperial Assault. It continues to be in production. People have talked about, oh, are they going to come out with a 2.0 of it, because they've essentially stopped like adding on content. They say they're done, so that's people's speculations. But then they have the combat miniatures, Legion, and then whatever's coming out new. That may be why they have, you know, stopped making this stuff, because they've focused on other things. But I still love me some Imperial Assault. It's just classic dungeon crawler in my opinion. Number 2 is Zombicide Black Plague. This one has always been up there on my list as well. It has kind of traded places with a lot of these other games in the top 10. But as I have come to almost become fatigued sometimes with overbearing rule sets or campaign games, things like that, I continue to fall back to Zombicide, especially Black Plague and Green Horde, because they're essentially in that same universe. Because of the simplicity, it's just pure darn fun. There is dice chucking galore in this one, so you can go totally get screwed. There is a ton of plastic in the game. There's a ton of miniatures. This picture here on the left literally is no joke, a scenario that you often see. Hopefully you're not stuck in the middle, but more often than not, towards the end of the game, there's going to be so many zombies in several of the spaces that they just spill out. You have no place to put them. What's nice is that usually you're just playing with, like, all right, here's the goblin zombies or the orc zombies, or here's the, village people zombies, things like that. So you don't have to have every single piece of content that is you own for the game because you went crazy and collected everything. You are going to be putting a lot of miniatures on the board, more than any other game, easily, because the zombies just keep coming and coming and coming. But it is just pure hack and slash, pure dice chucking fun. It's all about leveling up your character to just take out enemies left and right, but the higher you level up, the more enemies are going to keep coming at you. Honestly, the biggest drawback for this game is that you're usually playing with 6, like 1x1 tiles in some form or fashion. All the scenarios seem to create these big, huge boards, which kind of makes sense because the way zombies come in, you got to have some room to run around or escape and things like that. Also, you always have to run 6 characters, but my solution for that, and also one of the reasons why I continue to come back to Black Plague and Green Horde, is that Zombicide, or CMON, created a companion app which helps you manage the characters. It allows you to get rid of the dashboards, all the cards. Basically, I sit down when I play Black Plague and I just have the board and the miniatures in front of me, maybe some door tokens, and that's it. You can even roll the dice in the app. I tend to like to roll the physical dice, but I don't deal with 6 player boards. I don't deal with 6 sets of equipment and all that stuff. All of that is managed in this app. It's free to download. To my knowledge, it's still available. It's one that I will make sure I don't ever delete off of my thing. But they're not. They did it for some of the older versions of Zombicide, but they have not ever added any of their new ones. So Invader's not on there, and Second Edition was not on there, and Undead or Alive is not on there. And I think that is a huge mistake on their part, because it makes the game so much more accessible to the smaller player count. So anyways, take that for what you will. If you have a group or several people who are willing to play two-handed, I certainly have played six-handed before with 6 player boards, and you could still do it. It just is a table hog. But this, again, the game is just fun. It's just pure fun. It's not overly complicated. You don't have to stress too hard about it. It's just like, go find you some zombies or some cool stuff to upgrade your hero, and then go find you some zombies and hack them and slash them. And finally, our number 1. I could not help myself. I could not help not putting Frosthaven on this picture. It is essentially Gloomhaven, because I am patiently as possible waiting for my copy of Frosthaven to arrive. And so I think a lot of my decision to have this be at the top is the hype of Frosthaven that I have. But let's discuss, for anybody who may not be familiar with Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is a dungeon crawler, but it is very much a Euro dungeon crawler. There are no dice checks in this game. There's no randomness of dice rolls. You pretty much know exactly what you're going to attack a person with. And once you flip over initiative cards, you know what they're going to attack you back with. Now, there are modifier cards that you're going to flip over, which may screw you if you get the miss, or may make your day if you get the ×2, and there's a lot of, minor adjustments in between. The storyline in original Gloomhaven was okay. If you, took a few weeks off between scenarios, my brother-in-law and I, who I played them all of, a completed Gloomhaven with, and we're now trying to finish up Jaws of the Lion as quickly as possible before Frosthaven arrives. Couldn't tell you necessarily. I could give you like a rough estimate, maybe he could, but I don't think we could really like go into detail about the storyline. But that's not why we played. We love this kind of hand management game where you are just looking at your cards. Everything is accessible to you at the beginning. Deciding which ones you want to play. Which ones you want to play will determine what player order you go in that turn, whether you can sneak ahead of the bad guys and take some of them out before they attack you back. There was, you know, this game is not light on setup time. It always took a while to set up and break down. Not a huge fan of the map tiles, which is why I pushed from day one of Frosthaven's announcement to have them come up with a scenario book similar to Jaws of the Lion, where everything's printed out there. It makes it so much easier. There are lots of tips and tricks, and I have a video on tips and tricks for Gloomhaven to kind of make your life a little easier. Quality of life stuff as far as playing the game is concerned. I really like the fact that like your character is a miniature, but everything else is a standee. I know they're coming out with miniatures here in the future, but the hand management system, the uniqueness of all the enemies, there being so much content in the box, but also the secret boxes and the boxes of people that you can retire your character and then unlock is just amazing. You really want to know what's inside that box. I want to know what's inside that one, and I was never disappointed. You know, I certainly had my favorites, but like I could tell you right now that picture of the what looks like a kind of an angry guy, you know, he's got spiky hair and a nose. I've unlocked that guy, and he was amazing. This is the #1 game and has been the #1 game on BGG's top 100 since it came out, which is like 5 years now, for a reason. I think the only thing that's going to unseat it, at least right now, is Frosthaven, its successor. There's just so many good things to say about Frosthaven. Now, it is pricey. It is a huge game. There is cardboard galore. I think it's like 27 sheets of punch outs. It's a decently complicated game to learn, like getting through the rule book, but there's a ton of teach me videos out there, a ton of people who already know how to play. You will not regret diving into this game, picking it up, and going for a ride. But you got to be ready for what it is. It's a big campaign game. That is going to do it for my list of dungeon crawlers for 12 Days of Christmas. If you have any that you feel like I left off the list, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Just very quickly, some that didn't quite make the cut. Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia, Cthulhu, Death May Die. Like I said, Descent, Journeys in the Dark, but that's really because I felt like I was covering that with Imperial Assault. Batman, the animated series, Shadow of the Bat, Arcadia Quest. That's just a handful of ones that were close to the top but didn't quite make my cut of top 12. If you have any that you've never heard me mention before, leave them in the comment section below. I'm always looking for new dungeon crawlers that are really good and deck builders. If you're enjoying this series, please consider giving these videos a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.